Why in the living and dying hell did it just randomly decide, nah. Actually, I don't like you, Mike, and you should go away. I usually check this before starting stream, but like, why does it switch off and then stop working? This is like super annoying. Ugh. Okay. Let me re-explain what I just explained, but probably in a more direct way. So by using \% you can catch your current cursor position. You can see that we're currently on T. So if we search for this, what ends up happening is that we get a search, but it was always on our cursor. So if we try to press N, we go to the next match, but that next match is on the position of our cursor. So what ends up happening, it's as if our cursor, this white box, disappears, but in reality, this is just the highlighting that happens for when you are on a match. So that is for searches, but in the substitute command or the G command, \% would not match anything. It matches 0 width. Why is that useful? Let's try it out. So we use the substitute command, then \% and now we can say eins. Or can we not? Wait, hold up. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's start with the search first then. Where we enter that, you can see it already matches apparently L, but not really. Because you can see once we try to type in eins to match the rest of the word lines, it doesn't match anything, proving to us that \% doesn't actually match anything. It matches 0 width. It matches a position. It doesn't match any text. So we have to type in lines. Well, what's the difference if we just said lines here? Very fair question, which is why let's go and do this. So lines, word lines. So let's be on the W of word and try to search for \% lines. You can see that nothing matches because lines isn't directly after our cursor, but word is. So we have typed in lines here. If we remove this, yeah, obviously it matches because now it doesn't matter. But if we make a constraint that it has to be directly after our cursor position, then now it doesn't match, which I find to be really fucking cool. I still have yet to find like a real use for this, but I find it to be really cool. Well, I found a potential use, which I'm going to show you a bit later. But still, like, being real is just more cool than useful. Okay. Now let's move to lines, and now you'll see that now it works because it's directly after our cursor position. Cool. Let's go back to this file because it has a bit more columns, a bit more lines, because that's what we're going to be working with now. And let's use substitute because it's going to make a bit more sense here. Let's try to find some sequence of characters that appears multiple times in S. So you can immediately see that we have the colon. It appears at least 2 times. Well, I guess only 2 times in this entire file. We can do a bit of magic here. So, what if I wanted to remove all colons on specifically the second line? The reasonable way of doing this is just doing 2s, and it will only affect the second line. But let's ignore that. Let's say we just didn't know about it existing and decided to do it in a more complicated way just to show off this kind of thing as an example. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in reality. So let's do \% and you'll see this very commonly in like cool special groups, I think they're called. In Neovim patterns, you'll see \% very commonly. And now let's do 2L. And you can see that despite me using a % before the s to mean act on this entire file, it is still only matching the colon on the second line in the file. So effectively, \%2L means only match whatever I'm going to ask you to match, which in this case is the colon, on the second line. You can probably guess that 2 stands for the number of the line. So if we did 1, it now only catches the first line. Okay. But we don't have to type in the absolute number. I am currently, like my cursor is on the first line, you can see here. So if I do dot, it will match it on the first line, because that's the line that I'm on. Let's do enter. That's very strange, because it for sure was found. Oh, I was in the third line. Hold up, let me shut up my cat. Okay. Right, so it turns out I was on the third line, which is kind of surprising, because you probably also saw that there was a 0 here, which means that like your cursor is on this line. I guess I was on the third one. So let's go to the second line now and redo our previous command. You can see that now it matches on the second line, even though it matched on the first line. The first time we did this, when you press enter, the colon disappears because it matched. If we do this on the first line, it only acts on this line. Once again, this is like not useful yet. This is just an example, because you could do this way easier like this, and it already acts on the line that you're on. So I do realize that right now it's not very useful. It begins being useful. Actually, before I transition, okay, hold up now, I already did transition. Before we go on to the next like thing that I'm going towards, a few more things to show. So we have lines here that you can put in a number or the current line. Well, you can actually do ranges. So I want to replace colons on all the lines that are below 3. And you can see it acts on the first and second line. Let's go away and add one here, just for the example. Wait, hold up, since when is that the case? Holy shit, I'm pretty sure I didn't execute this command, yet it stays in history. I didn't know that. I've been using Vim for however fucking long. Hold up, let me actually go look. Let me first remember how I change scenes. I think like this, right? Yes. And events, I guess not. Anniversaries, I have a file with all like important events. When did I start using Vim? I started using Vim in 2022, 24th of September. So it's like almost exactly 2 years now, which is pretty insane. And I come back, blammo. I haven't used scenes in a while. Like, I haven't streamed in a month. So yeah. Huh. The more we know, I guess. I thought that things remain in history only if we execute them, but I guess not. This is like very useful. Okay, so you can see that despite there being a colon on the 6th line, no clue how to pronounce that, honestly, it only catches the colons before the 3rd line. And I believe if there was a colon here, it wouldn't get matched because it's not below 3, it is 3, you know? But still, I think, yeah, I know how to do this without this like fuckery, because we could say on the range from the start, I believe that's the thing you use for start in ranges, from the start to the 2nd line. No, not that. Oh, well, use 1, of course. And use $ to mean the last line and the first. So this is how we would do this by default, and this is still more reasonable. So once again, not yet practical to use this. However, let's add a colon here. And now bring this to like the actual meaning behind it. Let's add another one. Wait, how does this work? I think you have to do it after the pattern. Well, hold up now. What the hell? Well, what do I do now? My example doesn't work. Or actually, it might work and it just doesn't show. That's very much possible. No, it straight up just doesn't work. Interesting. Well, as you can see, my idea was to make basically 2 ranges, only catch colons before the 3rd line or after the 5th line. But I'm not exactly sure why it doesn't work now, because it actually is supposed to work. Huh. Well, I guess scratch that. But yeah, at the very least, there is a thing like, oh, bigger than 3. So you can do smaller than 3 or bigger than 3, or whatever your line number actually is. And it will affect after that line. Pretty sure you can't do this. Wait, where are we? We are here. Let's move here and try it out. Oh, you can! Oh, that's actually interesting. Huh. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure this wasn't in the docs or I missed it, but I guess you can do all the lines after this line. And then all the lines before this line. To reiterate, this is still not useful. And you can probably start to notice like a pattern. Look at this thing, isn't it cool? It's not useful, but it's cool. So that's probably going to be most of the stream. I don't know if that's the case for you, but at least for me, Vim has become a hobby that I learn simply because it's like interesting on its own. I have reached beyond the point of, oh, this is actually practically useful and improves my efficiency, to the land of, oh wow, that's just so neat. So I hope I can attract people who are also interested in that. So our cursor is on this line. There are columns before and after it, and we can use this range from the current line to the last line. Replace column with nothing. So I'm showing this to mean that these are equivalent, but this is way easier and understandable than this, and you won't have to memorize this syntax. But I'm going to show you an example eventually that is practically different from what we're doing here. An example where we actually will need this. That's a bit later. So we went over absolute, lower, bigger, and relative lines. Well, what if I told you there's the same exact thing for columns? We're catching 6. Yeah, I guess this. So now we're catching columns that are specifically on the 6th column. That's like, what are they called in English? I forget. But like a phrase that you say really quickly because it's difficult to say quickly. And this is that. This is like difficult to pronounce. So now we're actually doing something that we can't do with the ranges like we could with lines. So this actually is practically useful. I'm not sure when you will ever want to, oh, let me replace columns on this specific column. But let's try to make up an example. Let's say this is like a smaller file, and I can be pretty sure that outside of this area, there won't be any other closing brackets on the same column. So what I could do is S on this column, and annoyingly it moved me somewhere, which is very annoying. So on this column, right bracket, meaning remove it. So we're using the dot again, so you can see that the dot is not exclusive for lines, it works for columns as well. The only difference is instead of L, we type C. As you can see, actually, I recently made a mapping for this situation to disable errors so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I have removed all the right square brackets on the column that I was on in this entire file. Granted, you would probably want... Wait, hold up, what happened? Okay, I thought that it did more than it was supposed to. I was worrying for nothing. Well, I guess it did this, which is most of the reason why you would probably do it with visual block mode anyway, rather than a substitute. So yeah, we continue on with our example of, isn't this cool? It's not useful, but it's cool. So, and in a similar way, we can do, oh, this has to appear on like more than the 5th column. You can see that we're matching these two, but we're not matching these two. Thank you. Hell yeah. I'm glad you can appreciate it. Haven't seen you before, I think. If you haven't yet, I have a Discord server full of cool people who are also into Linux programming, Rust, Neovim, Fish Shell, and whatever else. The link is in the description if you want to join. So, I can potentially see a world where this is useful, because currently I'm just showing off, oh, colon, but in reality, you would probably be doing something a bit more complex, like, oh, let's delete all the word most that is bigger than fifth column. Why is that ever useful? I can actually come up with an example. So in Lua, functions can be global or they can be local. How would you maybe rename? I'm not sure how to like collect the example fully. First time here, I'm enjoying, honestly. That's great. Let me try to make a part of the example make sense, and I hope you'll like reach your hand over to me and like be okay with the example not being like too sensical. So our goal here is to match all of the functions that are local. So how would we do this? We would use this. So it has to be bigger than the first column. We search for function. And see how this is actually useful? We matched all the function keywords, but only those that don't start immediately at the start of the line. Let me continue on with the theme of showing you like a different way of doing this. A different way of doing this would be start of the line, and now we have to somehow invert it. It proceeds with any character and then any amount of any character. So here we did almost the same thing. We didn't match the function that starts immediately at the start of the line. Now we have to somehow remove local space after this, which I could do using \zs. So this is another way of doing this. I talked about zs and ze in another one of my streams. Don't remember which one, unfortunately, but somewhere. Or otherwise, you can read the help pages and Neovim on them, because they're amazing. They're the most important group in Vim patterns that I found through literally just reading the entire help page on patterns. So yeah, this is another way that we could use to do this. But multiple different ways to express the same idea is very helpful, because when you want to search for functions that don't start immediately on a line, for me it's a bit easier to connect that, oh, it has to be not on the first column function. I would say that connecting this idea in my head is easier than what we just did previously. With the start of the line, then something, then we actually start the matching, then function. Like, that approach felt a bit more complicated than this one. Only functions that don't immediately start. So yeah, this is pretty cool. Then, interestingly, this is very silly. You can do this relatively as well. So all the functions that start after my current column position. So I was on this column, the second one. So all the functions that are after. How is this useful at all? As usual, not very, but I do imagine a situation where it can be useful. Let's say I'm on this column and I search for function. We can see that we got moved like a lot forward. So what we're effectively doing here is we're searching for all the closures or all the lambdas, all the function objects, all the whatever else name you might be used to with your programming language, but effectively all the functions that are not just like functions, but functions that are used within somewhere else. This is not foolproof. We might have missed some, like I do realize that, but it's a quick way to have a quick look. See, like we moved, oh, that's actually interesting. This updates every time we go to the next match. Okay, we did something completely different than what I thought I did. What we ended up doing here is we found the most right function. The function that is like the most to the right in the entire file. This is not what I wanted to do, but this is actually potentially far more useful, you know? So, okay, basically, if you wanted to find a comment that is like the most to the right comment in your file, here we go, we found it, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so this is the rightmost comment. You might look at this and you're like, maybe I should move this to a different line so it doesn't wrap literally 5 times in a row. So this is quite interesting. And then, well, similarly, we can also use less than current column. So this way we can do the opposite. Hold up. Let's actually search for a comment. So let's do it again. So here we can find the comment that is leftmost instead. I hope this is like sparking some ideas for you, because even I haven't come up with actual use cases for all of these yet. We can probably see how this can be really useful in very specific situations where you're going to be glad that you know these. You might come across a situation like this maybe once in a year, but you'll feel really cool for knowing all of this. At least I would. My approach to making content is basically making content that I would want to watch. It's a pretty, like, selfish approach, I guess. But I never really find Vim-related content that is just like, look at these hyper-specific, interesting pieces about Vim. I generally only find very high-level content, like, oh, did you know about the norm command? Oh, for what it's worth, it's actually still something that most Vim users don't know about, and it's very powerful, and I super recommend it. It is incredible, but that's a whole nother topic. Basically, something like norm for me is like so obvious and known that I keep running across content that talks about things that I've seen a billion times. And nobody talks about the deeper things that, how would you even know this? So in case any of you like know content creators that go in deep like I do, please let me know. I would love to watch them. But yeah, otherwise I just make the content that I would want to see. So we have less than current colon, but then if you wanted to absolute, if you wanted to go for the example of function that I tried showing you, what do we have? Like 8, I don't know, function 8, 7, 6. Yeah, so bigger than 7. Now this is effectively, oh, it has to be a closure, and we're looking for all the closures. And you can see we have more than 99. There's probably some way to see how many search results we got. I don't know how, but I'm sure there's a way to see a precise number rather than bigger than 99. But we can go through this, and maybe you make a macro that acts on all of these matches, like in every closure do this thing. So this is how it can be potentially useful, considering that we didn't miss any closure, which I doubt we did, although it's possible here, for example. Actually, no, it shouldn't be possible. Well, regardless, we can check this, whether we missed anything, by doing local function. Yeah, we would have missed this one, I think. By the way, here, instead of capital R, which would work like this, I did G capital R. What's the difference? So R, or capital R, replaces characters one by one, but G capital R replaces place, I guess. So here I have a tab which takes up 3 characters. I use G capital R specifically, so I would change every place rather than every character. See the difference? Once again, I have used this maybe once in the entire time I've used Vim, but it's cool. What else do we have? Yeah, so similarly you can do absolute numbers, bigger than absolute numbers, lesser than dot, bigger than dot, smaller than dot, the usual stuff. I just showed you the difference between characters and, let's call them visual characters or visual columns. There's also that difference in these patterns. So rather than C, you can do V, and here the difference will be visual characters. Let me try to show this off. Yeah, here. So let's do \% 3C function. So because it starts on the 3rd column, it matches. But if we do 3V, it now doesn't, because it's not on the 3rd visual column, which would be here. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I believe we do 6, I guess 7. Now it matches because it's on the 7th visual column. Yeah. So as you can probably guess, you can also do bigger than, lesser than, you get the idea, as well as dot. So those are the 3 things that we have. Let's go here to our example file once again and try to use them, because I remember being able to use them for something useful. And that is a replacement. So what we can do, actually, I just remembered that what I'm about to show you can still be done more easily through a different thing, but that doesn't matter. So starting from the 7th column has to be at least 7, but less than 10. Wait, hold up, but that didn't work before, but it's about to work now, I hope. Maybe you have to do it like this. Something is beginning to work, possibly. So we have 8 and 9. Replaces it with ASDF. Let's change this to 11. And now it starts working. So effectively, we start with this line, hotkey to toggle, and the 8th column is T. So we match literally as much as we can, but the constraints that we put here is that we can only match if the column is bigger than 7 and the column is also less than, for example, 10. We do 11 and now we replaced 2 with ASDF without needing to know whatever the fuck was on those columns. We just specified the range of columns that we want to replace. Let's add a % sign here, and now you can see that we did a replacement of our columns in the entire file, replacing from 8th to the 10th exclusively, I'm guessing, with ASDF. You can add a space here and here. Yeah, and then I believe we can also do % sign bigger than the second line. And now it works. Not sure it didn't work before, but now it works. But less than the 5th line. How hyper-specific, right? So we replaced from the 8th to the 10th column only from the 3rd line to the 4th line inclusively with ASDF, with spaces. So this is the kind of magic that we can do here. So let's quickly go ahead and copy this, because we're going to need this. The reason I told you that there's actually a better way of doing this is because we can select something in visual mode, in visual block mode, and do S, using our visual selection, so \% sign capital V, match. I guess we can't. Right, so, And if we do ASDF, I see what's happening. So \% sign capital V, what it does is it's a restriction that means only catch within my latest visual selection, and it works like you would want. I actually talked all about it on the previous stream. But the difference here is that if we do match as much as you want, it will actually match the entirety of the line. So now we actually have to think about how we need to match. With our range example that we just had, that fucking humongous amount of syntax, we didn't need to worry about that. It had restrictions that were followed. There are no restrictions in this case, so we're having a more difficult time matching only 2 characters, which I guess we can just do like this. But that's a different thing. So yeah, I guess we can do it like this. Then we escape this and this. Blammo. So that's another way of doing it. Which, yeah, is simpler. But now you have to think about it in a different way. In my previous visual selection, catch this amount of characters. So that's the approach. Catch this many characters. While in our range example, we simply said match from here to here. We didn't need to calculate how many characters we're trying to match. So you see the difference? Yeah, so now to the example that actually is useful. Finally, the match command, you can also abbreviate to just mat. So you do mat, then some highlight group that you already have. One that you'll most definitely already have is yellow, or red, or aqua, or blue, orange, probably something else that I don't remember. Purple, I believe, also exists by default. So let's just put yellow, uppercase yellow. And now, what does the match command do? It matches a pattern that you enter here. Oh, it doesn't show you what's matching. Well, whatever. You're going to see. So it grabs that pattern and highlights that pattern, like whatever matches, with the highlight group that we just gave it. So let's do this thing. Let's match the current line and match the current visual column. I believe this should already work. Ah, interesting, it doesn't auto-update. So my cursor was on this character. So this is the line, and this is the visual column. And I colored this exact place with yellow. Let's redo this to something else. Let's say, oops, nope, not that. Let's color all the lines starting from 2 and all the visual columns that are bigger than 7, and see what happened. So these are the first 2 lines, so bigger than 2 in terms of lines, and then columns bigger than whatever number I just entered. I already forgot. Whoops. Voila! And we just colored all of this by using a pattern. So this we wouldn't be able to do, because I don't think match accepts a range, so we couldn't circumvent using lines here, and columns we obviously couldn't, like, overall. I'm not sure if this, works, so let's try it out. Let's do match, yellow. And by the way, every time you use match, it overrides the previous match that you just did, so this area is going to disappear right now. So let's select our visual selection. Oh, right. We can't use range at all in match. Like, we can't even provide a range to it, which is interesting. Let's reselect this and do this. Interesting, it only selected the cursor position. How can we make this do more? Maybe if we match everything? Huh. But then it only acts on the... Yeah, so as you can see, we can't conveniently use my previous visual selection for this kind of behavior. Like, it works kind of strangely. It only affects the current line. And I believe we cannot use %. Yeah, that's like not a thing. But long story short, you probably wouldn't be using match for this kind of thing. The actual usage of match is that maybe you want to look out for a certain word, and you don't necessarily want to like keep it in your search. You just want to make that word a bit more visible. So you can do muting, and now this word is like going to be visible for you for a long time. You can continue on in searching for other stuff and using the search function just as normal, but you basically syntax highlighted this pattern. That's what you did. So this may potentially be useful if you make a bunch of easy to enter pre-built highlight groups. You can easily use them to basically mark some sort of pattern, and with using lines, columns, and visual columns, as well as your cursor position, using all of that together might help you make things even more precise. So yeah, I quite appreciate it. Haven't used it for real yet, but I'm really excited for the time where I finally will, because surely this is actually useful eventually, maybe in a few years. And by the way, if you want to remove your match highlighting, just do match again. So mat or match, and it's gone. I believe there's a way to create another match, match thingy. So usually you only have one, but I think there is a way to have two at a time. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in like a reasonable way, where it just like can have as many as you want. It is restricted, but for like more details on that kind of thing, you should read the help page. All right, what next? We talked about this, and we talked about match. Let's talk about a certain remap that I made that made me far more likely to use substitute in places where I would usually do something else. Let's go here. Yeah, actually, this is the perfect place. Let's be here. So, by default, when you press colon, you go into command mode. I remapped it, so for me, it's actually enter. So when I press enter, I go into command mode. That makes the most sense for me, because you press enter, then enter some command, then press enter to... How do I fit another word, enter, here? To basically execute the command. So having the enter ring of the mode and executing on different buttons doesn't really make sense to me. Plus, opening command mode feels so big as an action. It also makes more sense to keep it on enter. So, I pressed enter once. You can see that in my command line, there is nothing. So what I did is that if there is nothing in my command line, if I press enter again, now it is %. So a bit more realistically, I quickly press enter twice, and now I can use a command over all lines in the file, like sort, for example, to sort all the lines in the file. It's terrifying when you do on some code. It's very hilarious. It's going to unfreak out in a second. Here it is. I find this to be way easier and faster than enter. Now I have to move my pinky finger to shift, make sure I hold it down, and then reach all over to 5. I know I'm making it very dramatic here, but it's actually kind of annoying to have to do. When now it's just enter, enter, which I can press very quickly. But we don't stop here, because if I press enter again, I would never execute %, like as is, you know? It just goes me to the end of the file and I would just press G. So if I press enter again, the range changes, the range rotates. And what is this range? It basically means from the current line to the current line plus this many lines. So effectively, it's as if you're doing V7J and then your command. It is effectively that, but you don't have to go into visual mode or select anything. You just directly say, oh, to this line down. So let's substitute end for finish. You can see here that these ends were not touched, only these ones, because we were on this line and 7 down. At this point I can't calculate, too difficult. I think it was this line that is the finish line. So up to and including this line, that is where you can execute S to replace end with finish. Cool. I find this super cool. So here, 3 enters is a bit much. I might change it to something else different in the future, but for now it's fine. And I just do 7S and finish. And you can see how this is like considerably more approachable to do this than if you had to do this by hand. See, I'm already fucking up many times. Like, this is a bit too much to actually do. And this is way easier. Oops, I forgot to press the actual number. Finish. Where you could also do this. And you can argue this is easier and faster. But I don't like using visual mode where I don't need visual mode, you know? If, for example, what I wanted to do is go up, then yeah, obviously now I would kind of have to use visual mode. Unless I wanted to create another thing, which is like, oh, from this line to this line minus whatever. I'm pretty sure you can do this. Or you would do it here, maybe. Whatever. But yeah, so I showed off, I think on the last stream, you can actually pass a count to the substitute command. So you can do replace end, finish, now the flags, and now the count, so 7. So you can do it like this, but you may have noticed that it's not showing you what it is matching right now. Because right now you're only acting on this line. So using a count kind of sucks ass, actually, like on second thought, because you don't know what is going to happen until you type in that range or that count. And then you have to come back kind of annoyingly, because this is a whole word apparently, or have to go into Control F to edit this. Basically, you end up making things more difficult than you would want, while just providing the range first as a normal range rather than a count, and then do your thing is way more straightforward and doesn't require you to reach into visual mode. Let's actually compare the amount of characters that you need to press. So V7J, so 2 characters, enter. So we needed to do 2 characters. 1, okay, 2 characters. Oh, they're equal. Interesting, because we do V, we remove 7 because we need to enter it anyway, and J. So this is the visual mode approach. And my approach of rotating ranges requires 2 enters and then a 7. So effectively they take up the same amount of effort, slightly. You can even argue that pressing enter takes more effort than doing VJ, but for some reason pressing enter 3 times in a row is easier than V7J. I might just be a really big hater of visual mode, who knows, but yeah, for some reason that is the case for me. So if you just prefer, I guess, this kind of thing, here you go. You can make it so you can quickly rotate to a relative range starting from the current line to execute your commands. And by the way, I'm just making a useful mapping here effectively. I'm not doing anything special because I can just enter, whoops, I can just enter this myself. It's just that I find that it's kind of unreasonable to type all of this in, and that's why I'm making a useful mapping for it. So if you are comfortable with taking a bit more time and not really reaching for trying to be the most fast and efficient possible, then things like the $sign to mean the last line in ranges, the dot, the +7 and -7, or any other number, of course. So actually using the full power of ranges is going to give you a lot of power. So if you can bother to type them in, or maybe make some sort of framework of remaps to make this faster for you, go ahead, go right ahead, because this is actually amazing. But I find that aside from the very common situation of let's do this command blank lines down, like this is very common, aside from this I would otherwise just use visual mode, because blammo, it automatically uses the range that I want. But here, if I can, oops, I do prefer this. So let's actually get to how I did the mapping overall. Rotate range. So first of all, we get command line. And I think I might have shown this off to someone, or maybe on stream. I, at this point, I already don't remember. We get the contents of the command line. If it's empty, then we make it be %. If it is now %, turn it into this range. If the command line is this range, turn it back into %. Yes, so actually, I press enter once, twice, thrice, I press it again, and now it starts rotating between the two ranges. But as soon as I make this something else, like I press a 7, and I press enter, now enter works like normal. Because of this. By using feed keys int, which is this. Basically it means act as if the user pressed enter. But here we fill the command line programmatically. What I might do in the future is make shift enter. And I wonder if I do not map this. Interesting. Yeah, so I might make it so shift enter starts me with this like with this range. So I do shift enter and it would make this appear immediately, and that way maybe it would be like even faster. So say I do shift enter 9s and finish, right? So like just imagine that it would put in the range automatically, and then I don't need to press enter thrice, I would just have to press shift enter. But this is like hyper micro optimizations that I will have to consider if I even need. If I do, I might add those. So effectively what I'm saying here is that these small changes that allow you to use some useful functionality can actually make a huge difference in you using that functionality and ultimately being happier with using your editor, because like, oh, I prefer this for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be a solid reason, because technically using the same amount of characters as using visual mode, or possibly even more characters, and you're doing kind of the same thing, but maybe you prefer one of the other. So think of ways you can make mappings to make your usage just kind of nicer, you know? Actually, I have this question. Okay. So I wanted to check, what if you go into visual mode, go into command mode and come back? I was expecting it to maybe stay in visual mode, which would be an argument against visual moding your ranges, but no, it is smart. So it just goes to normal mode. You can use GV, by the way, to come back to your last visual selection. Oh, you can also go to the left triangle bracket mark. I have it remapped, so that's why it doesn't work for me. So yeah, basically for you, this and then this will go you to the start of your latest visual selection, and this will go you to the end of your last visual selection. You might already know this, considering that is what is used in ranges. So what this actually means is that starting from the line in mark left triangle bracket, like on the same line, and we're using single quote here to mean line, this is the starting line, and the ending line is the mark right triangle bracket, so the end of the selection. So this is what this means actually. Makes me realize that, like, god damn, I know a lot about this fucking shitty program. It's pretty ridiculous. Wait, have I not pushed this? Oh, I see what's... yeah, I see. So I also had in my rotation what I just showed you, basically a thing for your last visual selection. Then I realized that I would rather keep the functionality of rotating between two, because if I wanted to do something with my last visual selection, I would just do GV and then enter. It's kind of better. That's why I removed it. Yeah, but I also probably didn't push because I have fucking 16 commits. So I'm gonna push in case you already know where to go. My GitHub profile is in my GitHub page. Wait, what? My GitHub profile is linked in the description, and there you can find dot files, and here's the path. I sometimes, when it's like a lot of code, I would link it directly, but the thing is, by the time you're watching this VOD, it probably already moved, got renamed, got deleted because I actually decided, actually this sucks for whatever reason. This happens really often. So that's why I don't really feel like giving a link, because it's likely to get broken. And if I give you a static link that ensures that it stays, well, then you won't get maybe useful updates of this. It's a dilemma that I truthfully shouldn't be caring about. Oh, another thing that I realized some time ago. So I'm on this column. When I do J and K, I go down and up, obviously. And I end up on the same column when possible. On the same, like, actual column, not visual column, I believe. As you can see from the inlay hint. We don't appear like in the middle of the hint because you can't. So we end up on the same column when possible. When there isn't that column, we end up at the last column. What is interesting is that if you go to the end of the line, we might expect, oh, we will end up here because it's like the same column. No, when you're on the last character of the line, you will continue being on the last character of the line forever. So instead of doing specifically, oh, go some amount of lines down and then to the end, you can, if you want, go to the end first and then 10J. Because this will guarantee you're going to be on the last character of the line. It actually took me a really long time to figure this out, or rather to notice it. For some reason, where my cursor ends up in terms of columns was really not obvious to me for the longest time. And then I finally noticed it. I was like, ah. Another interesting thing. So we pressed $sign here to go to the end of the line, right? Did you know that you can actually give a count to $sign? So if we do $sign, we go to the last character on the following line, on the next line. So what you can essentially do is do D6 $sign, and we are targeting this line, the last character on this line. So $sign, that's what we did. We deleted from this column on this line to the last column, 5 lines down. Blammo. Also broke syntax highlighting. So it's not very obvious where we got, but you can technically use this if you want to. So maybe you want to, maybe you want to delete this line and change what's on this line at the same time. So what you could do is C2 $sign get and blammo. Very overly complicated and strange way of doing this, but you might get into situations where this will be useful. Okay. So rotate range. We talked about the S thingy a lot. Let's come back to it for a second. Okay, so A appears a lot. So let's do S and replace A with B. By default, in the substitute command, it will only match the first match and replace it. And then if you give it the G flag, it will match every match that it can find. You can actually revert this behavior, which is what's happening right now for me. For me, by default, it matches every single match. And if I provide it the G flag, it only matches the first one. To do this, you G default. You change the G default option to true. In like normal configuration, I'm using Astro Neovim here, but normally this would be vim opt G default is true. Blammo. But keep in mind that as the documentation says, this may break some plugins. I assume probably it's more likely to break Vim script plugins. Thank you very much. And it might not have that effect as much on Lua plugins. This is just a gander, I'm guessing. It's not a guarantee. But yeah, there's something to look out for, that it may break some plugins, but so far it hasn't. So far everything works correctly with this option on. Maybe I just haven't ran into enough situations. So now you don't have to keep adding the G flag anytime you want to replace all matches, which is probably what you want to do by default anyway. And it is like very nice that you can still bring back your behavior. Yeah, like on expand tab, for example, let's go here. You can bring back your previous behavior by using the flag again. So it's not like you're losing possibly useful behavior. I find that to be really nice. Let's go look at my G capital L mapping. So as I show you different things that I'm capable of now doing, there's a bunch of errors popping up, making it difficult to see. So I made a mapping to toggle, in my case, virtual lines. So let's make some error. And now you can see, oh, Jesus Christ, that's so much. And now maybe the example I was showing you is very unclear because, well, goddamn, it's very hard to see. G capital L, blammo, it's all gone. G capital L again, it's now back. So I'm using virtual lines here in this function. If virtual lines is true, then we set it to false. If it is not true, we make it be true. I'm using virtual lines here because I am using the plugin LSP lines that shows errors on virtual lines instead of on the end of the line. I prefer that, but if you're not using this plugin, you would change virtual lines to I don't even remember what. Virtual text, I believe. Yeah, you would use virtual text instead of virtual lines to make this kind of mapping. Well, as in, you would replace it everywhere. Yes, I did just find a situation where I could practice actually using relative ranges. What about it? Yeah, the more I think about it, the more shift enter sounds pretty neat as an idea. Then I might consider doing alt enter to be %sign, but I think that is a bit of a stretch. I think double enter is fine, triple enter is a bit much. Well, I'll see about it. Then, a cool thing about CMP. So, the completion engine that you're probably using in Neovim. I thought for the longest time that for you to be able to accept a suggestion, you first need to make sure that you see the suggestion window. So as I type in my thing, you saw a slight delay there. And I thought that you can't like accept the suggestion in this delay. You have to wait for it to appear and then you already can accept the suggestion. Turns out turns out that is not true. Well, there it actually had enough time. See, there the suggestion window has not popped up yet, but I was able to accept the suggestion regardless, even though we didn't see the suggestion window. So as long as you have a hotkey to complete, to use the current suggestion, you don't have to wait for the suggestion window. What this brings to the table is that you can make some very easy to type in snippets, like I have with Func, and just blindly use them without having to wait for the billion different options to appear in this window. Like, you don't have to wait. You can just immediately use them. Funnel. What am I doing? Blammo. So yeah, I find this to be actually a very big game changer. I use a lot of different snippets, as you can see here. And this file I actually am going to give you. This keeps happening. For some reason, after I execute GHL into xclip, I then can't use exit to exit my shell. No clue why that is the case, but for some reason it is. So I use a bunch of snippets, and I made them kind of wordy. So for example, this func used to be a function this, because what I was trying to go for is, oh, this needs to be easily visible and recognizable in the suggestion window, so you can quickly select it. But now my approach is different. Let's make it fairly short, and let's try to make it unique, so that when I do, like when I enter it and blindly accept the suggestion, I can be pretty sure that it's going to be the suggestion that I want. What I'll probably change it to later is something like FNF. It's unlikely that something is going to match FNF exactly. I would be surprised. And it would stand for function full. So essentially some mnemonic that makes sense for me, and that is easy and fast to type in, so that I can blindly accept the suggestion and use the snippet. And that way I won't have to see, like, it takes a fucking while for it to appear with the snippet from the language server of Lua. Like, it takes a while. And what I effectively have to do, see there, by the time it appeared, I have already typed in the entire keyword. But here I didn't need to. So I appreciate that a lot. So let's go to CMP, to my config, to show you the mapping that I have. So this is the mapping that I have to accept a suggestion. So to confirm a suggestion, you might be using tab, but I use alt semicolon, and yeah, as you can see, it uses the first one even if you don't see it. It's very nice. So let me give you a thingy so you can go look at it. We'll exit. Of course it will. No clue why. But for some reason it just doesn't like either GHL or xclip. Fucking God knows why. Thinking if I'm tired enough or not. Yeah, I am tired. So if you enjoyed watching this stream, and maybe you want to find more people who are into this kind of thing, into Neovim, Linux, Rust, programming, all sorts of stuff, then join my Discord server. The link is in the description. I'll be happy to see you there.